NATO and US imperialism function as twin engines of global domination. They actively obstruct liberation movements in Africa and in Korea. For anti-imperialists, this is critical to understand. If we recall the 2011 NATO-backed intervention in Libya under the pretext of quote-unquote protecting civilians, that resulted in the deliberate destruction of Africa's most prosperous independent state. Libya under Gaddafi had the highest human development index in Africa, free healthcare, education, and a Pan-African currency initiative that was underway, which threatened Western financial dominance. So obviously, Libya had to be put down. So NATO's bombing campaign, the dismantling of Libya's sovereignty, is significant because it also unleashed the destabilization across the Sahel, creating fertile ground for AFRICOM's expansion under the guise of counterterrorism. So AFRICOM's presence, which is the US African Command, has not only brought instability, but it has brought chaos. So since its inception in 2007 under Bush and expanded under Obama, we've seen a 500% increase in so-called Islamic violence, drone strikes and proxy wars. So as France retained economic control over West African CFA front countries, the US militarized the entire continent. So, and this is a crisis that NATO has continued to exacerbate. I will say today, though, Eritrea remains without an AFRICOM presence. They never had one, and Nigeria just kicked them out. So meanwhile, in Korea, NATO's Cold War logic of militarized containment sustains the division. The US militarizes the ROK with 30,000 troops alongside THAAD missile systems, explicitly aimed at encircling China and Russia. The annual provocative war drills that occur, like the Key Resolve, which simulate decapitation strikes against the DPRK, they deliberately escalate tensions to justify a permanent US presence, deliberately blocking peaceful reunification. So the same imperialist system that arms the Zionist state of Israel, a NATO ally, and destabilizes Africa, also props up the ROK's right-wing puppet regimes, ensuring both continents remain fractured for Western profit. The interconnectedness of US-NATO domination in Africa and Korea reveals a deliberate strategy to divide and rule by destabilizing. So we can see that in Africa with examples like in Sudan and Somalia and the attempts currently against the AES. And perpetuating Korea's division. We can see that currently with the what's occurring with the US's role in the ROK. Excuse me. In this way, we see the balkanization by US-EU NATO axis of domination, ensuring weak, dependent states that cannot challenge Western hegemony. And just as an aside, this is not in my notes, but listening to you all speak, and I had thought about the US being as scared to see a unified Korea as they are to see one united socialist Africa. With the US arms industry like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon profiting from perpetual war, whether it is in Africa via counterterrorism or Asia via anti-DPRK or anti-China provocation, Africa's resources and Korea's strategic position as a wedge against China are exploited to maintain Western capitalist domination. AFRICOM and the US Indo-Pacific Command are military enforcers of imperialism, systematically blocking African and Korean liberation and should be seen as such. The struggle for African liberation here in the US and the Korean reunification are also interconnected fronts of US imperialism. So the US empire operates through dual system internal repression and external domination. There are militarized police occupying African neighborhoods here in the US, whether in collaboration with Zionist Israel through the Deadly Exchange program or reinforcing tactics of occupation and racialized surveillance, the 1033 program, and Cop City. And I'll just conclude with saying this: the same systems that murders Africans in the US and on the continent with impunity threatens Korea with nuclear drills, while mass incarceration and forced partition serve parallel functions, fracturing collective power. So we see the division of Korea and the fraction of Black political power, whether here in the US or on the continent, serve the same purpose of disrupting collective resistance.